I love this fragrance, but I almost always hate wearing it. Let me tell you all about this one. Hello, welcome back to Seldomly Often. I'm Daniel, today we're talking fragrances, and this is a practical review of Beaufort London's Rake Ruin. These reviews are for fragrances I have a lot of experience with, multiple wears in many situations, and I'm meant to give you a general idea of what it feels to wear the fragrance. As per usual, I do a lot of research before buying fragrances, but I don't really like to go into details about notes and accords, as I don't think that they help the end user. I'd rather talk about the wear experience as a whole. Today we're going to be starting our beautiful journey with the eccentric, narrative, and evocative house of Beaufort London. The very British Beaufort London house was initially founded by the drummer of the brand The Prodigy, which is one of my favorite brands ever, by the way. Very edgy, very in your face, and this house really replicates that style. Beaufort London is a house which is inspired by the pre-Victorian era, riding the end of the 1700s into the early 1800s, and heavily themed around naval battling. Beaufort London itself, the name is inspired by Sir Francis Beaufort, which was a naval officer, a British naval officer, who embarked at age 12, skipping school, and ultimately becoming a naval legend. There's also a sea in the Nordic Sea called the Sea of Beaufort, so there's that. Being a house that is inspired by that period and by naval battles themselves, Beaufort London is a house that really embraces a lot of gritty textures and notes, mainly smoke. Smoke is one of those notes that is permanent throughout the house and definitely permanent throughout Rake Ruin. As I mentioned in my intro, I really like Rake Ruin as a fragrance, as a concept, and as an execution, but I can barely wear it because it's one of the most anxiety-inducing fragrances in my collection. It really triggers me in a way that very few fragrances do. And although sometimes, very rarely, I do enjoy wearing it, it's mostly a struggle, it's mostly just a giant chore. And although incredibly anxiety-inducing to me, I really respect this fragrance. It's beautiful, it's poetic, it's dramatic, and tragic. The wear experience is in your face, it's edgy, it's thought-provoking, but one of you might actually find it to your taste. And to be completely honest, one of the reasons why I struggle to wear this is the massive bitter smoke note in here, which if you know me, if you've seen my other reviews, I'm insanely sensitive to, so yeah, there's that. Rake Ruin is a fragrance that is designed to represent the spiraling into depravity of the British youth. And it's actually inspired by a series of paintings called Rake's Progress, which depicts this young fellow, Tom Rakewell's journey into ruin. The story of Tom Rakewell is basically that he inherited a large sum of money, which he promptly decided to burn and disperse on prostitution and on alcohol. And to cut it short, at the end of the story, the guy ends up in a mental institution. So yeah, not the most happy ending story. This is a very harsh, very traumatic, very in-your-face fragrance that really depicts this sort of attitude. A lot of people say that this fragrance smells like a burnt down house, like a burnt down forest. I totally get that. There's a ton of acrid, bitter smoke in here, which really permeates every stage of the fragrance. This fragrance is so unrelentless with the smoky bitterness that to me, it's almost traumatic. Rake Ruin's relationship with alcohol consumption, and specifically to gin, actually has a real world counterpart because Beaufort London has a sister company called Beaufort Gin or something like that. And they sell a specific British gin, which is actually served with a sample of Rake Ruin. And this fragrance apparently really enhances that gin experience. Now, I'm not a gin connoisseur by any stretch of the imagination. I barely drink any alcohol, but nonetheless, I really like the tie-in and I really like the story behind the thing. But before we dive deeper into the scent profile and completely bonkers wear experience of Rake Ruin, let's talk about the presentation. All of the fragrances come in these black bottles here. Some of them have an illustration. Some other ones have some text or the name of the fragrance. This one here has a blatant X. Now, a lot of people say that the X is referring to the naval battling and to the war aspect of the Beaufort London inspiration, but actually the X is there to depict marked. Basically marked by society, and it's really there referring to the Rake Ruin type of story and inspiration. Most, if not all of the bottles come in this 50 ml format. This one here is actually a 30% concentration, so incredibly strong. This one here is actually see-through. It's a heavy smoke, so it's not a complete lacquer. From the outside, it looks opaque, but it's really good because you can actually see the liquid content in here. The cap for Beaufort London bottles is this black chunk of wood, which features an embossing on top. The bottom is this black plastic thing that sort of clicks into place, not very securely. Overall, the cap feels kind of light, almost too light to be wood, but it's probably very, very dry, and it does feel like wood. It does look like wood. It has wood imperfections. The atomizer assembly for these bottles is good, but not great. It's not one of those beautifully pressurized atomizers, but it does the job. I'll give it one spray because I've been wearing this fragrance all day, and it's incredibly hard to wear, so I don't want to choke myself out. Yeah, not that great here, but it serves the purpose. Again, this fragrance is insanely potent, insanely unrelentless, and to me, it's a very, very difficult wear. Although I really like the aesthetic of these bottles that kind of look opaque from the outside, but they're easily to see through, I don't like the finishing of these bottles because this sort of a smoke aspect, which is painted on top, is incredibly fragile. If you've seen my other bottle, Terror and Magnificence, it has all kinds of chips there, and it's really annoying because you can barely clean this thing that it starts scratching and chipping. So the quality control on this is a little bit mid. I would say that overall the presentation is pretty good, especially for the price that you pay, because these are not super duper expensive. 50 mLs of these, which are again very potent and quite high quality, they run for about 130-ish or 140. I'm not really sure because I can't pick them up from the official UK reseller because they won't ship to Switzerland. But from other official vendors in Europe, these retail for about 140, which I think is actually fair given how unique and how well crafted these fragrances are. But let's get into the scent profile and wear experience for Rake Ruin. What does this actually smell like? So as I mentioned before, this is pretty much just bitter smoke to me. It's a very overwhelming wear experience. I'm incredibly sensitive to bitter smoke. And it's so weird because some days I feel like I like it, some days I feel like I can pull this off, but some other days it's completely nerve-wracking. It's just anxiety-inducing. This completely unrelentless smoke note is bitter, it's acrid, it's pungent, it's piercing. It basically drives me mad. And the issue with this is that, again, this smoke note really permeates the whole wear experience and really never gives up. It's kind of like a torture. Thankfully, the longevity of this fragrance is not too long. We're talking about 6 to 7 hours. So the scent actually releases at a certain point, giving you a little bit of relief. And I know that the way I'm describing this scent makes it sound like absolute torture, but again, I am insanely sensitive to smoke. And to be completely fair, I wore it yesterday because I actually was planning to film this review yesterday, but I didn't get to it because I had other stuff going on. But yesterday, I kind of was vibing with it. I kind of was in tune with it. I wasn't minding it. I don't know why. I went actually a lot of sprays, and the whole day I was like, you know what? This is actually not that bad. Today, I decided to finally review it. I sprayed it again, and it was completely unbearable to me. It is completely unbearable. I've been sitting with this fragrance for the past 4 hours, and I am almost getting a headache. Not your typical fragrance-induced headache that is triggered by smell or something like that. This is more of your nervous headache, an anxiety-induced headache. And again, it's weird because sometimes I really vibe with this, but the majority of the time I wear this, to me, it's completely unwearable. And the weird thing about this is that in the air around you, it's really good. So I don't think that this is hard to pull off in public or anything like that. It just doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me as a person. So spoiler, I will be trading this off because I feel that I want to wear it. I am intrigued by it. I really want to give it a chance every now and then, but then I spray it on and I almost always regret it. Now, don't take my word for it. This is a beautiful, evocative fragrance, and if you really like smoke notes, this might actually be for you. But let's try to deconstruct the wear experience a little bit more. So when you first spray this, you get this massive smoky note. It's a very bitter, very piercing type of smoke. Now, I like smoke. I like some sort of smoke. I like the sweet type of smoke. I like the incense smoke. I like sweet, dense, dark smoke, which is in something like Interlude. That is actually one of my favorite notes ever. The smoke in here is burnt. It's charred. It's bitter. There's nothing sweet about this fragrance whatsoever. This is a very piercing fragrance, objectively, I think. You might vibe with that sort of a smell, but this is objectively very harsh. It's harsh, it's bitter, it's burnt. And the way people describe it as the smell of a burnt down house, I totally get it. If you look at the note breakdown for Rake Ruin, it's actually massive, but on my skin, everything is overwhelmed by this black, pungent smoke. The only thing that I get is probably the gin note or the gin accord or whatever. There's a lot of greenery in here, which is actually responsible to making the smoke a lot more bitter. I don't know enough about gin. I'm definitely not enough of a gin connoisseur to pick up on the gin aspect of this, and I completely fail to understand how this could be paired with a shot of gin because, I don't know, This is just so bitter, so pungent, so acrid. It has an appeal to it because it's very thought out, it's very directional. It doesn't feel messy or chaotic like a lot of Italian fragrances from the Italian perfumers like Lorenzo Mazzaglia. This feels very, very well designed. Beaufort London, or at least my experience with Beaufort London, is that the fragrance house really overdoses certain type of ingredients, namely smoke. But sometimes they pair it with something that kind of like breaks down the smoke, it kind of cuts through it. In this case, it's pretty much just smoke. My other fragrances that I have, namely Terror and Magnificence, they really emphasize the smoke and they balance that out with something else. This is just pure smoke to me. And the interesting part of this, perfumer-wise, again, if you look at the note breakdown, is that smoke is present in the top, in the mid, and in the base. It's ever present, it's unrelentless, and I don't know, it really never evolves. I think it really hits the mark with the rake and ruin type of aspect in the spiraling into depravity. This is, again, I really can't picture any type of situation where I would wear this because I don't like it personally. I've been told that it's not that bad, and I've been told that it's actually quite intriguing and very, very masculine and very deep, but I just can't pull it off myself. I can't wear it on myself without starting to feel anxiety and just nervousness. So I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm just triggered by this. Maybe it's some sort of underlying scent memory, but it just doesn't work for me. Now, again, I really, really do like this fragrance. I like it a lot, I respect it, and I wish I could pull this off because this is such a narrative, such an evocative scent. The evolution and transition part of the scent is also kind of a mystery to me because, again, we have this massive smoke note that really permeates the whole wear experience, but it does get smoother down the road. Basically, 3 hours to 4 hours down the road, the scent becomes a lot more wearable. It's still very bitter, it's still very acrid, but it's less nostril clearing, it's less overwhelming. I kind of get used to it. Maybe I just sort of surrender to it. But in the deep dry down, you can sort of start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. You can start picking out a little bit more ingredients. There's a lot more greenery in there. Weirdly enough, there are florals in here, which are completely absent from my wear experience, but there is some nuance down there. There's some resins, there's something else than smoke, and that's very much appreciated. Again, I don't enjoy the wear experience, but I can't help really respect it. I don't know why. There's something about this that is so intriguing to me, and that's why I feel that I need to get rid of it, because otherwise I will keep wearing it and keep suffering through it. I'm probably not the right person to talk about practicalities for this, but I'll try to be unbiased. First of all, performance. The projection on this is absolutely massive upon initial sprays. Thankfully, it kind of lets off after about half an hour and it starts becoming a little bit more mild and bearable. The longevity, as I mentioned before, is about 7 to 8 hours. It's not too long, especially how dense the scent comes across upon initial spray. It kind of evaporates into thin air later down the road. The skin scent phase of this, though, is insanely detectable, even all the way down to the dry down. And I don't know, I guess it's that bitter note that my skin really doesn't absorb. But overall, performance-wise for Rake and Ruin, if you're into it, is actually really good. When it comes to use case and versatility, we always confront ourselves with these abstract scents that really tell a story. Now, usually very narrative scents have a very distinct evolution, which makes them kind of unwearable just because they are a trip in itself. Rake and Ruin, in my opinion, is fairly linear, meaning that it keeps telling the same story over and over again. So if you like the scent, it's a pretty predictable wear. It's a very strong wear that is not recommended for daytime use just because it doesn't really fit the vibe. This is a night out type of scent. This is a very dark night, very smoky again. So you could probably pull this off easily in the evening in a loud event, especially if you're dressed up accordingly. This would make for really, really nice contrast. I think that it's overall pretty masculine given how bitter it is, given how acrid it is. But who knows, it might completely change on a different type of skin chemistry. And actually, the thought of a woman wearing this would be pretty badass. When it comes to demographics and age, I'm not really sure because this is such an abstract scent. It doesn't really lean mature or youthful per se because you really have to be into heavy smoky notes. And I really can't see a very mature type of person wearing this because it's so bold and in your face. But at the same time, it's so bitter and smoky that I really can't see it worn by a youthful crowd. Overall, I think that you really have to be into weird fragrances, and your age is pretty much independent at that point. This comes across as a very punk rock metal type of fragrance. You have to be edgy, you have to be dark, you have to be kind of intimidating, or quite the opposite and create that beautiful contrast. Topping off the practicalities with seasonality, in my opinion, this is a lot more directed to colder months. For some reason, I associate this smell, this scent profile, to a fireplace, and it doesn't really fit the summer type of vibes. Again, if you live in the mountains where I live, maybe a cold summer night could work. But overall, this comes across as very wintry, very frigid, bitter. It's just kind of like a dark type of scent. So I just can't see it worn in the summer. It just doesn't have that fresh, uplifting type of vibe. This is a very dramatic type of scent. And although this is supposed to be depicting a scene inside of a tavern or a pub with smoke and alcohol, I really don't get that type of picture. I'm more for that burned down house in the forest type of vibe. There's something about this that really feels spectral in a way. It feels haunted. You're like walking through this still smoldering type of burned down house. Everything is black, everything is charred, and there's still smoke coming off these pillars that are left. Everything is ashy, and around you there's this forest that kind of like got impregnated by this smoke aspect, but it's still green, it's still kind of fresh, and there's this insane contrast. So I don't know, I just get this picture about walking around in this scene of this fire, and you're just kind of puzzled and wondering what the hell happened. Okay, it's that part of the video where I present you some options for the fragrance I'm reviewing. Rake Ruin is a very particular fragrance. I really have nothing like that, nothing that triggers me in that way. So I decided to pick out smoky fragrances that have a very strong evolution, that are very fun, and that release that tension that is built up at the beginning. The first fragrance that I want to talk about is T-Rex by Zoologist. This is actually one of my favorite fragrances in my collection. This opens up insanely smoky. It's actually a quite similar smoke to Rake Ruin. It's very bitter, it's very acidic, it's very nostril clearing. This smells a little bit different because it doesn't smell as ashy. It smells more like a burning forest. It has a little bit more of a briny type of smell. It almost smells like olives. I don't know why I always pick this up. But then the beautiful thing about T-Rex is that basically a third into the wear experience, it starts clearing up. The smoke starts clearing up, and you start seeing a lot more facets there. It first goes to an animalic area where there's a lot of leathers. Then it becomes a lot more floral, green, and herbaceous. This is a wild ride. It's so abstract because most zoologists really represent the animal or the environment. This is really neither. This is kind of like a narration of the dinosaur era. And I don't know, I just love this. I love wearing this. And again, despite it being incredibly edgy and almost borderline unwearable in public, more than Rake Ruin in my opinion, I do enjoy this. It never gets fatiguing. I really love this. If you haven't smelled T-Rex, I really advise you get your nose on this because it's an insanely exciting wear experience with one of the best transitions in perfumery that I've ever smelled. The second fragrance that I want to show you also features a massive transformation top to bottom. It starts off edgy and harsh, and then becomes a lot smoother and open. This one here is Rien Incense by Etat Libre. This one is a little bit easier on the palate compared to T-Rex and even something like Rake Ruin because the initial smoke in here is very overpowering. It's massive, but it has a little bit of a sweet component to it because it's more incense smoke. So if you tolerate incense, you might absolutely love this. There's a strong animalic component in the opening, but again, this clears up fairly quickly. It clears up faster than T-Rex, and it goes down to a beautiful floral type of bed. And there's still a little bit of resinous funkiness, but overall, again, the way it opens up, it's completely mind-blowing. I really like this fragrance. The performance on this is absolutely insane. The projection on this is dangerously loud. I can't barely wear this anywhere because it's just so powerful. But again, once the scent kind of calms down and it opens up, it still lasts a ton of time on skin, and it's very beautiful, very enticing. I really like this. I have not smelled the original Rien, so I'm curious about that. I want to see if that is any way related to this. But yeah, masterpiece by Etat Libre, definitely one of the best perfumes from the house. Last but definitely not least, and we're going to be riding that theme of a harsh opening into an easier dry down here, we have Petroleum by Histoires de Parfums. This one here is an incredible fragrance. It's so unique. I've never smelled anything like this. Basically, this opens up with a very smoky, bitter type of oud, which upon initially spraying it and being like, what the hell is this? But then if you wait it out, maybe 15 to 20 minutes, it starts becoming milder, starts becoming sweeter. And then there's a weird aldehydic type of soapiness that really contrasts well with the oud. And I don't know, in the end, it becomes this really sweet type of a very funky animalicness, which to me is very, very wearable. I have not gathered any third-party comments on this yet, but I feel that that really weird combination of like soapiness, the clean soapiness with the weird animalic funkiness is so jarring, it's so different that it's almost, it almost transcends understanding. You just kind of like take it for what it is. So I'm not expecting many people to really comment negatively because again, there's that soapiness that gives you an impression of a perfume, but then there's that weird animalic facet. And it's completely different from other animalic scents that I have, such as Amouage Goldman, which are a lot more intentional. They're depicting something. This is a lot more abstract. Again, I have to give this a lot more wears. I have gotten this recently. I have not worn it too much. So I'll be going into details about this in my full review. But nonetheless, it's an amazing fragrance. Histoires de Parfums always delivers. I really like the house. If you can get this, because it's not easy to get, I would suggest to grab it. You can always resell it later. It's really a wild ride. But back to Rake Ruin for my final recommendations and overview. First of all, the House of Beaufort London. If you have not smelled anything from the house, get yourself a discovery kit because this is one of the most beautifully evocative, narrative, and complex and well thought out fragrance houses out there. All of their products are completely on point. They're so unique. They copy nothing. They smell like nothing else out there. They're such an inspiration. Rake Ruin specifically is a little bit of a harsh fragrance, again, for me. If you like smoke, if you like bitter smoke at that, you have to give this a try. It's arguably one of the harshest fragrances in my collection. It's probably the most difficult fragrance for me to wear just because it triggers me so badly. I'm gonna be trading this off to my friend Nat. She's gonna be giving me something else from Beaufort. And she might like this because she likes the smoky aspect. I'm very, very sensitive. So it might all turn out. This is something all right. And if nothing else, it's an incredibly exciting wear experience. I really do respect it. I really do like it. I wish I could pull this off. I wish I could wear this because I am weirdly attracted by the scent profile. Except, again, it only works a fraction of the time for me. I really have to be in a specific type of mood. I have to be hyper relaxed. I have to be able to compensate the surge in friction, the surge in nervousness that this gives me. But if this works for you, I mean, this is a massive thing. It's beautifully characterized. It has so much energy. It has so much edginess. I can't help but recommend it. Obviously, do not blind buy this. Get yourself a sample first, even if the idea intrigues you. And if the idea does intrigue you, first look at the other offerings from Beaufort London, because this one here is arguably one of the harshest ones in the bunch. And although I like animalics, although I like weird scents, I can't really wear this. But again, it might be a personal type of thing. So I wish you luck with Beaufort London. Please do yourself a favor, go sample the house. It's absolutely amazing. I really, really recommend it. If you like this type of content, if you like my approach to video, feel free to subscribe. It's always massively appreciated and it helps the channel. If you want to interact with me, leave a comment, suggestion, opinion, or anything else down below. I always reply and I always keep the conversation open. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your time. It's never taken for granted. See you in the next review. As per usual, see ya and cheers.